Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 347 of the Chronological Read Through the Bible. Today's reading covers James chapter 4 and 5, and we also enter into 1 Timothy chapter 1 and 2. I really want to look at James chapter 4 for my commentary today. As I shared yesterday, James has always been a favorite book out of the Bible, and it's just because he just jumps right in to practical, everyday living. A favorite verse out of James chapter 4 is verse 8. Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you. You know, when we enter into our time of prayer, our time of Bible reading, we're pulling ourselves close to the Lord. And it really is that intimate relationship. God desires to have that relationship with us. And I hope you desire to have that level of relationship with Him. You know, when we are interacting with individuals, we have to be willing to give of ourselves to form relationships with individuals. You have to open up a part of yourself to let them into your life. That's what we have to do with the Lord. Are you willing to sacrifice your wants and your desires to have a closer walk with Him? You know, this verse reminds us of God's desire for a relationship with us. I hope you equally desire a relationship with Him. So when we turn to Him, it's in humility. We're saying, for one, I can't do it on my own. And anybody out there who thinks you can live this life on your own, that you don't need God, you are fooling yourself. You are the man who's building his house on the sand rather than the rock. Verse 10 tells us to humble ourselves in the presence of the Lord, and He will exalt you. He will lift you up. When we're willing to say, I can't do it on my own, that's a real act of humility there. Especially in this day and age. Well, I'm sure it's always been this way, but people are very prideful of, well, I've got this. But we don't. We need Him. We need help. And what better help could we have than help from the Lord? You know, submit yourselves then to God, resist the devil, and he will what? He will flee from you. You know, we're given that promise. He's going to flee from us because you are in Christ. You have the Spirit of God in your life. Quit allowing the devil to have footholds in your life. This kind of goes back to when I talked about Philippians 4:8 a couple of days ago. A real favored passage, a favored verse, because I feel that people who walk in Philippians 4:8 find great freedom in life. But it's also a part of resisting the devil, because you're recognizing the things that aren't praiseworthy, the things that aren't lovely, the things that aren't noble or honorable, and you're putting those away. Because the devil, he's the father of lies. He's going to tell you that something is good when it's not, because he himself disguises himself, what? As an angel of light. For young people out there, the sooner you can cut ties with the things of this world and walk in the riches of what God has for you, the sooner you will be untethered, really, from this world, and you will be closer in your walk with the Lord. You know, the devil has a lot of hooks in people, and it's time that we start removing them. I think of a fish hook, and it digs in. If you've ever caught a fish hook in your finger, I've come pretty close to having them, but I learned early on to watch myself around hooks, because a couple of times as a child that I would almost get a fish hook caught in my finger, my dad was very quick to pull out his buck knife and say, don't worry, I can dig it out. That was intimidating enough to say, I'm going to be careful around fish hooks. You know, we need to be careful about the things of this world. We need to be careful about the schemes of the devil. We need to be ever watchful. The Lord can dig it out, just like my father could have dug a fish hook out of my finger with his butt knife. The Lord can free us from those things. The Lord can free us from the snares of the enemy, but it's not to say that it's going to be easy. It's not to say that there won't be some scars left, but the greatest part of that is that God forgives and God heals. He wants you to be free. Some of you may have heard me tell this story before. I feel like it's worth repeating, though, if you have. Many years ago, I had a disciple of mine. We were out in a state park in Alabama, and he was going through a very difficult time in his life. He just wasn't surrendering to the Lord, and he had been allowing the devil to just entangle him. We spent a long time walking trails that day in the park talking, but it was at the end of our journey when we had returned to the vehicle that the Lord had his own illustration for this young man. I had noticed when we were in the park, parking the car before starting on our journey, a bird up in a tree acting kind of weird, but the conversation with the young man overtook my attention to the bird. But when we returned to the vehicle after several hours of being on hiking trails, I noticed that bird was still up in the tree. And this time we walked over and gave more attention to this little bird up in the tree. I noticed that he was entangled in fishing line. And I pulled out my pocket knife and I started whittling away at the base of this little sapling until I had cut away enough of its wood that we could bend the tree down to get to the bird. Now, hopefully the statute of limitations is run down on cutting down a tree in a state park. But for that purpose, I'll leave the park's name out of this. But we reached the bird. I held it in my hand, gave the young man some tweezers out of my pocket knife, and we started cutting away the fishing line. And as you can imagine, that bird wasn't just peaceful in my hand. It was pecking away and biting at it. But after a little while, the last of the fishing line was removed from its talon. And I held my hand up and opened it up, and that bird flew off free. And the young man said, "That's what I've been doing, isn't it? I've been fighting. I've been fighting against you." He knew that I'd been trying to free him from all these things that entangled him. The Lord gave that illustration, and all of a sudden, he was free. Well, brothers and sisters, know this, that if you allow God to take you into his hand today, he can free you from all the snares of the enemy. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Brothers and sisters, I hope your day's going well. Until tomorrow, God bless.